Warhammer 40k is one of the largest and most in-depth hobbies that you can get yourself into. And while a lot of people think that it is that deep solely because of the lore, it is not, although the lore is obscenely deep. Instead, there are multiple aspects of 40k that you can get yourself into and take your mind off the horridness of the real world by escaping into someplace that's even worse. These aspects I like to call prongs of the hobby. So that way it's like a trident that's spearing deep into your wallet and taking everything that you have. The great thing about these prongs is that you don't need to get into every single one. Instead, you can pick one or two that you want to get really into and kind of ignore the others. You don't need to get into each, and a lot of people don't. You can go into lore, you can go into painting, anything like that. So today I want to overview each of these different prongs and give you an idea of which ones you might be most interested in starting off with and what you can get out of it. Let's get started with the lore. The lore is about the entire galaxy. This is in our Milky Way galaxy set 40,000 years into the future, with humanity having spread out across the entire galaxy. So there are a galaxy worth of stories that are to be told. But it happens that a vast majority of these stories happen to be about space marines. Now, why do people get into the setting of this whole galaxy? And it's often because of the genre that it is set in. It is not simply a science fiction. And it is simply because of the term that has been generated from Warhammer itself. The intro to Warhammer, a description of like what the galaxy and setting is, has been coined as a term for every kind of setting that is very similar to Warhammer. That is grim dark. This is the grim dark future of the 41st millennium, where there is only war. This is not your typical science fiction where your heroes are going to prevail, or that there's an evil empire that must be overthrown and there's ways that they can interact with one another and things will turn out for the best. No, this is a brutal place to live in. There are demons and aliens and horrid monsters that exist. And that is just with the faction that we most attribute ourselves to. That is the Imperium. They are the ones that are often the most horrid. And we're supposed to interact with them the most. This is a world where technology has become superstition. We used to be at the top of everything. But we have slowly slid into decline because of ignorance and idiocracy and power struggles over tens of thousands of years. Forget the promise of progress in technology, for more has been forgotten than anyone currently knows in the setting. So that is what we are living in. Religion has taken over, and it is highlighting the worst aspects of our humanity. But why is it doing that? And why is that something that we are very interested in? It is because the setting is satire. For the people in the back, it is satire. You do not want to live in the Imperium of Man. It is one of the most brutal authoritarian regimes that could ever exist in history. It is a satire mostly on late 80s conservatism in Britain, which is where the entire kind of setting comes from. So you have all of these bad, evil people that are utilizing their positions of power to gain their own individual power, less for the greater of everyone that is around them. And that is slowly built into corruption and decline. Everything is declined. The Imperium is slowly rotting from the inside, solely, and it exists as it is and as powerful as it is currently, just solely because of the sheer mass that it is and the massive weaponry that they have. But why? Why would we even want to think about living or like going into a world like this? Well, it's because if everything sucks and you need to be constantly fighting, everything is awesome. You have bombastic action. You have over-the-top everything. The main warriors of this entire world are space marines that wade into battle with chainsaw swords. That is awesome. The weakest weapon is a laser gun that blows limbs off. The main weapon of the space marines in general is a bolter. It is a submachine gun that shoots projectile grenades that implode not on impact, but once they pass into the target. So if it hits you, it's going into your chest and exploding outwards. It is a brutal world, but at the same time, you are getting these fantastic action set pieces, and you can have people doing fantastic things. Now, if you remember, I was talking about there are no heroes. Well, how are you supposed to follow through with things? Well, let me ask you, have you ever been watching a movie and you're watching the heroes of the story wade through henchmen? They're kicking ass, they're taking names, they're cutting everyone down, and they may have at this point killed 100 henchmen. But then they get to the final villain and they decide, oh no, I have morals, I can't kill him. It wouldn't be right. I can't live for vengeance. No, that doesn't happen in Warhammer 40k. They don't even let the villains say a word before they blow their brains out, because it is better to have let them die. And that hero that you were rooting for in that moment, well, there could be another story where they killed 20 puppies. Who knows? There are only shades of gray, but that shades of gray allow for a lot more intricacy of politics, intricacy of stories than just the hero prevails. And even when you do have stories that are about moralistic people that are living within this world, well, they're not exactly winning most of the time. They win their own little victories, but the overall cause that they are fighting for will fail because everything sucks. Now, I just do want to go back to the satire aspect of this. This is not your funny satire. This is not poking fun at the systems in place that it is trying to highlight and make fun of. It is a very semi-serious setting for that reason. And it's not like Don't Look Up, where it is beating you over the head with its message telling you, no, you're bad. And if you're not getting the joke, you're a terrible human being. And why would you even think about it? No, it's specifically highlighting the horridness of the systems in order to say it as a warning. Don't be like this. Don't be these people. Do you see how things are living? And that is the kind of story that is being told. You're probably asking the screen right now, well, I'm really interested in the setting now. Where do I get started? And that is going to depend on what kind of story you are most interested in. And you can get yourself into further ones afterwards, but there are good starting points depending on what you like. If you like Band of Brothers style shows, where it is a squad of just normal men that are just trying to survive through the horrors of war, I would suggest the Gaunt's Ghost series, starting with the first and only book. This is a squad of a regiment of Imperial Guard that are the only people that have survived from their planet after demons basically took over their planet and destroyed everything. And they are fighting on the front lines of a crusade trying to take it back from demons that are corrupting everything in the world. But it is the story similar to Band of Brothers. You have them interacting, you have them doing stupid stuff like trying to raid a gambling range and trying to get money and trying to get extra booze when they're on shore leave. And they fight in a way that is different and they scout forward. And it is a very good story for that reason. If you like more Marvel style characters that are very more heroic and maybe have a little bit of a foil to themselves, I would suggest the Ciaphas Cain stories. The Ciaphas Cain stories are very much about this one character who is the hero of the Imperium, Ciaphas Cain. He wades into battle. He is a commissar, so it gives you a great introduction that way into one of the main aspects. But Ciaphas, his story is very funny. It is more about him being a coward in his own mind. To him, his narration is all about how terrible of a human being he is, how self-centered he is, and it causes a lot of funny moments. But it's also a great introduction that way into multiple factions, because within the first two books, you actually get to see different aliens that exist within 40k. So you get a view of Tau, Genestealer cults, Necrons, and Orcs, along with some introduction to the Imperial Guard as well. You don't get many Space Marines, but who cares? There's so many stories about Space Marines. If you like gritty detective stories, I would actually suggest the Eisenhorn series. Starting off with Xenos, this one right here. So Xenos is a lot more of one Inquisitor, and an Inquisitor is someone that is going out into the galaxy. They have absolute power over whatever they say they want to do. So no one can say no technically to an Inquisitor. But it is his story of trying to find a specific cult and trying to get a specific book. It is more gritty and it is a lot more in depth of the kind of characters that you would normally see that are morally dubious, but believe that they're doing things for the right good. And as well, you'll with Inquisitors, their motto is innocent proves nothing. So you have a character with that much power trying to solve mysteries throughout the galaxy. If you do want to do Space Marines and want to go really in depth of like the most horrible people, I would suggest the Night Lords trilogies. That gives you an aspect of one of the worst legions of Space Marines. They are on the Chaos side of things, so they are corrupted, but it gives you an idea of the kind of horrid people that, yeah, they're evil people, but you kind of root for them because they're kind of awesome in how evil they are. And if you are really interested in going in depth of other stories, I would actually really highly recommend some of the Necron stories that have recently come out, specifically in Infinite and Divine and the Twice Dead King series. Infinite and Divine is hilarious for being spooky, scary skeletons. These are skeleton robos with no souls, but they're incredibly funny moments throughout this book, and the characters are fantastic. Twice Dead King is a much more serious side of things with the Necrons, but you have a lot more of a Shakespearean and classic story that is being told of tragedy, and they are both incredibly good. Now, if you do want to read any of these books, I would highly recommend getting them on Audible because it is hard sometimes to get the books, the physical books sometimes, and a lot of them are on Audible anyway. If you want a 30-day free trial and one free audiobook, check out the description down below, and that will give you one of them. Just pick any of these, they're all on Audible, and actually that's how I read a lot of my books. I have the entire Night Lord series. I don't have Xenos, obviously, but I read everything through there. Next aspect I'm gonna go into is the modeling aspect. The one that most people are familiar with, the plastic crack. You go to your local game store, you pick up a box with a flat of, models, and you put them together, build them, and slap some paint on them. Easy, right? No, you gotta make sure everything is perfect. Optimize every single piece of war gear that is on there. Magnetize everything so that way you can fight in the battlefield as much as you want. No, I'm absolutely just kidding. The way that you can get into the modeling, and is one of the easiest ways in, is because you can just do that. You can pick up one or two things and build them however you want. They come in a sprue like this, where you're gonna have multiple little pieces. So this is a Sacrosanct Celestian squad, and these are basically just Sisters of Battle that have shields on them with some cool little weapons that you could do with that. This is also probably what I would say is the most zen aspect. You basically you have your models, you're going to set them down, you're gonna have your snipper clippers on your hobby model or hobby knife, and you're just gonna clip these out, build them together, put on a podcast or a TV show or something along those lines, and just build a couple models however you want. It is very chill and a very relaxed aspect of that. And what's more, once you actually get them built, is then you will prime them and then take some paint and put them on there. I personally like this aspect quite a bit because it is a creative outlet. You can paint your models in whatever way that you want to. Sure, if you want them to be a specific Space Marine chapter, or if you're specifically going after some lore, you're gonna paint them with very particular colors, but otherwise it doesn't really matter. Paint them how you want to and the way that you want them to look. If you want them to be the colors of the trans flag, people have done that. If you want them to be have an American Space Marine, so it's blue, red, and white and has the stars everywhere on it, go ham. It doesn't matter. These are your little dudes and you can paint them however you want. And at the end of it, you're gonna have something that you can be proud of because you did it yourself. There are also plenty of resources to paint in different ways. So there are different styles that you could try out. You can actually take a look at the box art itself and try and paint it exactly the way it is on the box. And this is called the heavy metal style of painting. It's GW's main and Citadel's main way of actually painting and highlighting a lot of the ways that it is on the box, but it looks best on the box. You can also try to use contrast or speed painting, where you actually just prime the model white and take a bunch of speed paints or contrast and just slap it on there. It'll automatically give you shading, recessing, all that kind of stuff. If you want to go into more advanced styles, you could do non-metallic metal, where you're going to make something look like it is metal without actually using any metallic paint, so it won't look shiny without that. So for example, this model here, I actually tried to do a non-metallic metal. And I tried to do something fun with it and, see what you did. Other ones, they are going to look like metal. So this one is actually using metallic paints that are dry brushed. So that's another way of doing things, is you take one of these big fat ones, you put a bunch of paint on it and you go, bah, 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 bah. And it gives you a pretty good effect. You can try different ways of actually doing it however you want, but what matters at the end of the day is you get something that you are proud of. A lot of people are going to tell you that Warhammer is obscenely expensive. And yes, it can definitely get very expensive, but it's not actually as expensive as you might think when you do a direct comparison of how you get into it. Take, for example, I'm just gonna pick on video gaming. If you wanna get into video gaming and you wanna have like Call of Duty, there are gonna be a couple things that you're gonna grab. The first thing is you're gonna grab a PS5, if you can, but you'll grab a PS5, which is gonna go for about, let's say, if you can find a digital edition, I think it's about $600. You could probably grab the Ragnarok edition, which comes with God of War, for $750, depending on everything. You might not have a TV. That's an entry cost to actually get in there. So you're gonna grab a nice 4K TV to go along with your PS5. You're not going for 8K or anything special. That's usually going for about, $500. And on top of that, if you're gonna buy Call of Duty Modern Warfare, that is actually going for $90 now. And that price doesn't decrease. So that's gonna cost you about $1,400. My math is probably wrong. I'm not looking at numbers right now. But that is the entry point just to get into video gaming. And then there might actually be the cost of the subscriptions to play online, which I think about $20 for PS Online. I play PC gaming mostly, so I don't know about subscriptions to play online. It's just the way I do. And even then, let's just say you're not getting into PC gaming, because that is its own bag of cats right there. If you are getting into Warhammer, there's only really a couple things that you need to get started. First off, you need one box. A box of troop is probably going to take you about $60 Canadian, which is what I'm going off of. You need the snipper clippers, which are going to cost you about $20 for a decent pair. These are expensive because they're the GW ones and we didn't know, but you can get a good one for $20, $30. A hobby knife, super cheap, not that much. Your glue, not that much expensive. You can get these for about $20, $30. You can get a set of brushes for $40. And then paints, get a decent setup of basic paints, another $50. I'm gonna put the real numbers of everything up here, but it comes out to about $250. So under $250, you get started in the hobby and trying different things. Compare that to the $1,300 to just start playing a PS5 game, plus everything else that you're eventually going to buy. It's not that bad. The model that you're going to be building too, the troops models, there are going to be about 10 of them in that box. That'll take you, a week or so to build all of them out. And then you can, if you're really wanting to make sure they look good, you could spend a couple months just painting those ones over time. And then you go grab another box, $60, another $60 every 2-3 months. That's a lot cheaper than what it would be comparatively to doing video gaming, where a new game is always going to cost you about $90 per, but the entry cost is a lot lower. Yes, it can get a lot more expensive, but just to get started and doing something creative is a lot less than you might think. And as well, you're keeping your eyes off of a screen, which actually helps you with strain. And especially if you are someone that is sitting at a desk all day like I am, all I am doing is looking at a black screen of death. So being able to paint is something to take my eyes off and relax them over time. And the best part about it is once you actually get decent, because to be fair, when you start off, you're not going to be very good at painting. You may not paint the best thing in the world, but it is something that you painted. No one else did. It is yours and yours alone. But over time, you will get better. I have gotten significantly better at painting over time. Like this, pretty decent, not too bad. But then I have like this. That's actually pretty good. I didn't put too much effort into it. I'm very satisfied with it. And then more involved, I put this into a painting competition. Didn't win. I think there's a lot more that I could have improved, but it's something that I've worked on over time. But no matter what, you are getting something out of it because you are taking your mind off of the stresses of the world, zenning out, have your podcast on, have a TV show on, and just enjoy the time that you have with doing something that gives you joy and gets you a creative outlet into the world. Oh boy. All right, now this is the part that's going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to go into Another aspect of Warhammer as a hobby, which is the game. The game is where things can get a little bit more expensive because, like I said, one of those boxes that costs you about $60 is a troop unit. That may give you about 100, 150 points. Games of 40k are played at about 500, 1,000, or 2,000 points. Each model has their own individual point value that you're going to combine for your one army. What's going to happen is that you're going to take your army, put it on one side of the table, your opponent with their army, which is going to be of a similar size to yours, is going to be on the opposite side, and you're going to be doing turn by turn, moving your models, shooting them, and rolling dice to see how things kind of play out through the game. So you'll often see a lot of people playing with tape measures, which is going to show you how far something can move. You have data sheets on each individual unit that will tell you how fast they move, how well they shoot, what kind of damage they'll do. So take this one, for example, here. I don't know if this could be seen. I'm going to say it can move 10 inches. So you'll go across here, go 10 inches, move it your 10, and then maybe you'll shoot and do other things. You roll dice with a D6, so you'll have something that might shoot and hit on 4 ups. So when you roll the dice, a single die, you'll see 4, a 5, or a 6, and depending on which one of those you get above, you'll hit. So 4, 5, 6, 50-50 shot of hitting. People love the game because there is a lot of complexity to it. There is about 15 or more factions that exist in there, and each one has their own individual abilities that play the game a little bit different. You can shoot a little bit better with one army and not be as good with melee, or there might be one army that is very, very good at charging up and moving its models directly in line and fighting you directly in place. You're often controlling for objectives, so melee armies are really good at that and just getting up and getting in your face. It is all about border control. And you can play either with, I am going to keep playing until I have tabled you, which is I have removed your models completely from the table by destroying them, or by doing with victory points, where by controlling an objective or doing specific actions, you've gained victory points throughout the game. And at the end of 5 rounds, whoever has the most victory points is the winner. These games can take anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 hours, depending on the size. So a 500 point game is not going to take as long as a 2,000 point game. And also how familiar you are with the rules, because it is often a lot of times you're looking up rules to be like, I can do this. So there's stratagems and there's different abilities for each unit that you're looking up, and there's wording, and there's a whole whack load of things. So 2 to 4 or 5 hours is about how long a game will take. Tournament standard, which is a 2,000 point game, should be taking just under 3 hours. I think 2.5 hours is the actual limit for a game. But it may not be as hard as you might think to get into it, because like I said, there's $60 for a troop and they're 100 points each, and how do I build up that? GW has made this a little bit easier with combat patrol boxes, which come at 500 points or so. Roughly, they're mostly used for getting into narrative games, which are based on power level and a whole other deal. But it should give you about 500 points. It costs 180 Canadian, and it will give you everything that you need to play one single game. Gives you an idea of different abilities for each army and how to go with that. And you don't even have to paint them for the game. You can just literally have them built and put them that way. The rules are where the expense can come a little bit more, with the core rule set and your codex, which has your specific rules for your faction, coming in at about $60 to $70 each. But there is a slightly, vodka-soaked website that you can go with all the rules. Wahapedia. That gives you everything that you need for reference, looking into each and every single little detail. But there is also ways to build your list with Battlescribe. There is even a small scale version of 40k called Kill Team, which instead of having units of models that are moving forward, so one of those boxes might be a unit, instead you're individually moving single models, and you're fighting as a commando squad, essentially. Spec ops that are going behind the lines to complete specific objectives. And it is, again, 2 opponents with their own models that are trying to take objectives, trying to move around, or just trying to outright kill one another. That one is a little bit easier to get into because typically the way they're setting it up now is you just need one box to get into it, and it is that $60 box of troops that has everything you need to go into it. Some rules, the instructions, and just find someone that has the rules and play with them. Pretty easy to get yourself into. And again, you don't need to paint in order to play the game. The painting aspect is in its own entirely separate thing. Some people will literally just prime it and then slap 3 paints, different colors on it, so that way it is tournament ready, and that is perfectly fine for a tournament. Doesn't matter. So if you like complex games with a lot of depth with them, with different interactions, and being able to build stories around a grand battle of these 2 factions duking it out head to head, this would be a great way for you to actually go into that. The final aspect of Warhammer as a hobby is 3D printing. You thought it was a trident and there was only 3? No, this is a fork, and stick it into your wallet because it's well done. People are doing this mostly as a way to supplement the other aspects of the hobby, getting models to paint, putting them on the table to play, or even just ones to build out a specific lore that they're very interested in. There are 2 types of printing. You have FDM and resin. FDM is where you have a nozzle being fed with a kind of spool of plastic that is being superheated and then kind of being moved around in space over and over and over again until it builds it up from the ground up, literally. This one is not as good for models, but is fantastic for building out terrain that you just want to get a whole bunch out. The next part is resin printing. This one is a little bit more difficult because what happens is you have a build plate, literally a piece of metal, that drops itself down into a vat of plastic, liquid plastic, and drops itself into the vat and just puts itself a little bit above where a LCD or LED screen is that emits UV light. This UV light activates the plastic that is in the vat and hardens it in the pattern that the screen is showing. The build plate moves up, pops it off of the screen, drops it down a little bit higher, repeats that process over time so that way it's building out the model from basically upside down, going up, and it looks like it's almost pulling it out of the resin vat. It's really cool. That is a little bit better for models because models are a lot more high detailed. FDM doesn't give you that high detail. So these in particular are 3D printed models that I have made because I have one in my basement. And you can see you get some pretty good detail out of it. The barrier to entry is not that bad either. You can get a decent printer for under $300, and you can get resin for about $50 for a kilo of resin. And that'll make you about 40 plus troop models and other types of things if you want, but it's a great way of getting into it. The only thing that I am going to say about it though, is that you need to be careful. The resin that you are using is a chemical. It is a toxic chemical. So when it is actually printing, it is emitting a fume that is actually toxic to you over time. So if you're breathing in, it is actually hurting your alveoli and your lungs. As well, touching it can cause an allergic reaction, so you need to be wearing gloves and a respirator when you are dealing with this. As well, when it comes out of the vat, you need to make sure it's properly washed with IPA or another harsh cleaner. So get some of the excess resin that's just sitting on there, rinse it completely off. You don't want this going into your water system, and then make sure it's completely dry and then fully cure it with some more UV light. Curing just makes sure that it is hardened because it's still in a soft state. You only cure it for a little bit of time when it's actually being pulled out of the vat. So that is one thing I just do want to say. There is also material costs and maintenance that you're going to have to do if parts break down on the printer. It is a hobby within itself and not something that if you're just looking to get 1 or 2 models out of, but if you are looking for a full army, or if you're looking to do maybe a little business on the side with it, it's a fantastic thing to do if you're looking at it as its own standalone thing, not solely for models. But nonetheless, there are plenty of incredible designers out there that actually make some fantastic STLs. So these are the files that you'll get from them that you can print out. These ones in particular are made by Piper Makes. I love her designs for Tau. It's actually one of the reasons why I really got into Tau is because of her designs for mechs, essentially. I really enjoy them. She's eventually doing Eldar kind of proxies. You also have one-page rules, Titan Forge, Station Forge. These are all incredible proxies for different factions within 40k. Some of them are not better than others. I still think some of the sculpts for GW, especially for Sisters of Battle and the AdMech and a few others, are much better by being from GW and then not designers. But Piper makes for Tau, love it. And those are the 4 aspects of Warhammer 40k as a hobby. There are links in the description for tools and equipment that I would recommend you use to get yourself started. If you have any questions regarding how to get started or anything in particular, comment down below and I will try and get to you as much as possible. If you do want to support the channel directly, we have YouTube memberships and Patreons. Those are in the description as well. And if you want to learn more about the lore, you can check out this video here where I go over all of the playable factions in the tabletop game with my wife, Sonam. That's all for today. Thank you and have a good one. Bye.